Hi, and welcome back to thoughtbot's development live stream. Super excited to join you again today. We're going to pick up right where we left off last week. I'm going to go over what that is. And I'm Chad Pytel, thoughtbot developer and CEO. And tomorrow is a holiday in the US. So I'm going to be off, but we're going to have a group of people from they're both in Europe from the thoughtbot team. They're going to be streaming starting at 9:30 UTC tomorrow. So if you're online then, check them out. They're going to be streaming on developing our Ruby gem, upgrading it. The suspenders Ruby gem. So that should be a good time. Definitely check them out tomorrow. So let's dive into what we're working on. We're doing real, adding features to a real production Rails app that we have. And I would, just a reminder as we go through, if you have any questions, comments, help along the way, feel free to drop it in the chat. Questions are always welcome throughout. So let me share my screen. One of the things that is really helpful and what we did last time, we're picking right back up. And so we left a failing spec here last time. And that is a great thing to do when you're like at the end of the day, or when you're moving away from one task and you're going to work on something else. Leaving a failing spec is a great way to leave things, because then you can look up that spec and you can pinpoint exactly where you left off and what you need to do next. And so that's what I've done here. Let's quick recap what the feature is that we're working on. This is our internal communication scheduling system that we use at thoughtbot. Here I am on the dashboard running. This is running locally. And if you tuned in last time or you're just turning in now, we have a concept. We do all our scheduling in this application. So we've got our schedule here. There's not a lot. It's just test data. But what we're doing is we're adding the ability to have the concept of staffing needs. And so this is recording things that we need to schedule. So like if a new client signs on with us, if a existing client needs additional people to join the project, that kind of thing, we can record those needs. So you click on this right now. This is where we're at. You can see we've got one staffing need here, very rudimentary. We started from scratch last time we were streaming last week, and we added the model. We added these views. And so you can click on Rails for Casino Night. There's no detail about it right now, but we did add the create assignment button, and then creating that assignment pre-populates the form with the dates that we had put in there, the project that it would be for, and then you just need to choose a person and click on create assignments. When you do that now, it will add them to the schedule, which brings us to the failing test. So the failing test is expected to find 0 projects with staffing needs. And if you look in the text of the page that is being displayed, we see staffing needs. We're back on the staffing needs page with 2 weeks of Rails for project name. So we do have the flash message, though, of commitment for 8 days of work was successfully created. So it's being added to the schedule, but 2 things are happening that are causing this failure. One, there's nothing that actually it actually, let me turn off the reaction. First thing is it's not marking the staffing need as having been filled. We didn't add that functionality yet. And the second is it's not going back to the page that we expect it to go back to. Um, and so let's jump to that feature spec. So we are um, in the feature spec, the schedule. It's not loading, so this is not sure what's happening here. The fuzzy finder. There we go. Wasn't finding it. So so this is the feature spec. Let me make this a little bit bigger, and we can see it's failing on line uh, 33. So right here. So what we expect after we click on create assignments is let me just after we click on create assignments, we're going to see the project name, which we see that's passing, and then we see 0 projects with staffing needs. The page we're ending back up on, though, is the staffing needs show page. So if we go over to the assignments, the commitments controller, what this is doing, it's using respond with, and it is doing telling after it's created, restore the location. This application, what it does is it records any GET requests so that you can create things in various places, and it'll take you back to where you created it from. And so that's what's happening here is um, the page is um, going back to the staffing needs. So that's part of the problem. I'm just going to refresh my memory here around restore location. You can see the commitments controller implements that. And so it says it's return to or default, and that we're giving it the default of schedule index path. So by default, it's going to go back to the schedule index path. Return to or default has a couple things. We can store something in the session of return to, or the default that's given, or the root path. So there's a before action. The store request location stores in the session. It's a before filter, before action, and it's continually storing the original full path if it's a storable request. And storable request is if the format is HTML, if it's a GET request, and if it's one of the actions that's storable, and that's either show or index. So we can override this by having our controller action overwrite the return to with where we want to go afterwards. And where we want it to go afterwards is the schedule index path. Hmm. Actually, let's just make that change. So I'm going to test drive this, but I'm actually not sure whether we want it to go back to the schedule index path or whether we want it to go back to the staffing needs index. Um, now that I say that out loud, I suspect we want it to go to the staffing needs index. But let's just do the spec is already expecting schedule index path. So let's just make that pass, and we can always adjust. So I believe if we're on the show page, we can set. Okay, so now let's rerun that spec. Okay, so now we're back on. I can tell already from the text being output that we're back on the scheduling page, and now what's failing is zero projects with staffing needs is not found. You can see if I can type it right. We see the text here is one project with staffing needs, and now we're getting to the point where the staffing need has not been marked as done, as not been filled. There's no functionality for that. We haven't added it yet. So I think that's the next most important thing to do. Um, so let's think about this staffing need. Here's the staffing need model. And if you've been following along, we have a commitment class. Commitment class is not an active record model. It's more like a wrapper around um, creating a bunch of the actual classes that make up the population of the schedule, which is called an assignment. So people are assigned to a project. So when we have a commitment is responsible for creating a bunch of assignments. So um, so this commitment class loops through, the starts on, the ends on, the person and the project, and then schedules out a bunch of the assignments for that time. So when the commitment is created, if it was for a staffing need, we're going to need to mark that staffing need as done. What's going through my head now is, do we want a relationship in the data model between a staffing need and all of the assignments that were created for it? And I'm literally, again, this is real work of a brand new feature. So just thinking through um, whether we actually want that or not. So I think it would be a nice to have. I think it'd be nice to have that, but even in the real world, as we're doing scheduling, we're not always going to be able to fill 100% staffing needs. And so we probably want some concept of whether it's done or not, whether uh, we are marking this as done and we no longer need to do any scheduling for it, even if the need was either met by scheduling two different people, that kind of thing. So we don't necessarily want it to automatically be marked as complete as soon as we schedule something related to a staffing need, because we might need to fill that in a couple of different ways. So I think that means what we want is we want a Boolean to indicate whether a staffing need is done or not. And then it will be a nice to have a relationship between all the assignments and the staffing need that went into them. So let's look at the spec. We have a staffing need being created here. And we weren't previously assigning it to a variable because we weren't doing anything with it. So now let me make this a little bit smaller, give us a little more room here. So now what I'm going to do, again, I do outside in test driven development. So I'm starting in the feature spec and then I'm going to add controller and unit tests as I go down in the actual implementation. So at the end of this um, spec now. Expect, uh, oops, staffing need, reload, and I'll say to be done. So now watch, you'll see when I run this spec, it's going to say, oh, it's not going to say anything because it's going to fail on this step first. So it's going to fail, expected the staffing need to be done, to respond to done, and it doesn't respond to done. Um, and so let's add that. We're going to add, actually, we have, so we're still in a branch, a feature branch now. We've only introduced the staffing need model in this branch. So let's just check out the migration that added staffing needs. Okay. So there's a migration that added staffing needs. Then there's a migration that added the relationship between staffing needs and skills. So what I would normally do if there was only one migration, I might just modify the migration because we're still in a feature branch and rerun it. But in this case, there's already another migration after it, and so I'm not gonna do that because it's gonna wipe things out. So we'll do Rails G migration, add done to staffing needs. So that's going to add the migration, and then we can so we're going to add a column to staffing needs that's called done. It's a Boolean. It defaults to false, and it needs to be set to something. It can't be null. So that is correct. And then we'll run that migration. Okay, so now we've added that. So if we rerun the feature spec, it should tell us that there's nothing, it's not done. Cool. So now what we want to do is we want to go down one level, and we're going to go to the commitment spec. And what we want is we want the commitment to be able to take in a staffing need that it is for. And once it has been created, mark that staffing need as done. And so here's the specs. We've got some specs for validations, and we have a spec for a create method, creates a new instance and calls save, initialize, receives params and assigns them. What I'm doing is I'm looking for the specs that I want to either change, or if there aren't any specs that I'm going to change, I want to find the ones I'm going to understand, the ones I'm going to add. Save creates multiple day assignment records. Okay. Cool. So what I'm seeing is that there are separate specs for initialize, create, and save. And so under initialize, I'm going to make sure that I can assign a param for staffing need. And this is just going to take the ID of a staffing need. And then commitment staffing need ID. So that's testing that. And then, well, actually, let's take it step by step. So let's run the spec there. So that failed just like we were expecting. Undefined method staffing need ID. PQRS T. So I like to add them in alphabetical order. So we're going to have an adder accessor, And then we have initialize. So just like person and project, where it is an object, but we need to take the ID, and then you can see it has a project method to load the project or return the project after it's loaded. We'll probably do something similar. So now our initializer is taking that. And so if we go back and run this spec again, I believe it should pass now. Yeah, awesome. So now we go to our spec for save. And what do we want to have happen here when it's for, you know what? This is very different functionality from the default saving method. So I'm going to write another spec that just tests that. I'm going to copy and paste the other one. There's nothing wrong, in my opinion, with copying and pasting. We need a person, project, commitment. We're going to call save. But then we're going to have a staffing need. And project. And no, it doesn't take a person. It's just related to a project. So then we say staffing need ID. Set it to the staffing need ID. And then what we're going to expect here is, let's delete these. We're going to expect staffing need reload to be done. Do we not use? Okay, yeah, we didn't need those. So expected staffing need to be done to be truthy, and it got false because we didn't add that functionality yet. And then I just want to check out the create. Oh no, yeah, so there's just specs for save, not create. Cool. So we go back to the commitment model, and now we have def save. So if it's valid, then save each of the day assignments and return self. Otherwise, return false. So we should be able to staffing need. Okay, so it's automatic. GitHub Copilot's automatically putting a ampersand there. I would prefer not to do that. To be perfectly honest, I would prefer to say if staffing need. So if there's a staffing need, then update done to true. So I'm doing a few things that I want to call out here. I'm explicitly checking for nil, which some people may disagree with, but it's the way I would prefer it to be, very explicit like that. The other thing is, there's a toggle method to toggle booleans and that kind of thing, but I'm not using that. I'm explicitly calling update with done because I don't want to toggle it. What happens if it happens to have been false? It's going to true. It's going to set it to false. So I want to explicitly set it to done there. Okay. And so now let's rerun the spec, see whether that passes. I think it might. 85% chance. No, didn't. Undefined local variable or method staffing need. Yeah, because we never implemented that. So we can say def staffing need. Let me just check. I think we're private here and I want to be private. Yep. So, this is an untested method. We need it internally for our class, but we don't need it externally right now. So I'm going to So if it's present, then we're going to find it. Otherwise, it'll be nil, which is what we want. Let's run that again. I think now, okay, now it's 90% chance of passing. Yeah, there we go. So that is passing. So we've gone all the way down to the model level now, and we're marking it as done. And so let's now, there's nothing else at the model level to do. So we're going to pop back all the way up to the feature spec. And what's going to happen is it's now saying it expected it to be done, but it's not. And that is because we added the functionality at the model level to do the right behavior, but our feature spec is passing. So that means something in the integration path is not hooked up. And that's because we never hooked up the controller spec. The controller to give the staffing need to the commitment. So if we go over to the commitments controller spec, we're going to just check our existing specs. We have a post create. It sends no notifications. And it has a commitment params here. The commitment params right now are ends on, expected work days. So if we wanted to add a spec at this level for the staffing need, we totally could. That's what I'm going to do. We don't need this to be associated with the correct project, which is interesting. It's all going to happen behind the scenes, though, so I think it's okay. We'll see whether um, it is actually okay. So I'm just going to change the params and run the specs. What I'm expecting is we're going to get an unpermitted parameter. Yeah, unpermitted parameter. So let's go to the actual controller and add that. And now that passes. And then we need the actual button to send that parameter. So now we go all the way back to our feature spec and give that a run. And I anticipate it's now going to be marked as done. And what we're going to get is 0 projects with staffing needs. Nope. Okay. So it was not marked as done. We expected the staffing need to be truthy as done. It is not. And so we are passing, the button is passing. Let me clean up my tabs here. The button is passing the thing, which will get to the new action appropriately, but then is not going to make its way to the create because there's nothing on the form for the staffing need. So if we go to the commitments form, we want to add a hidden field here about the staffing need. We can put it at the bottom, I think. Yeah, the whole thing is in the form, so we can just um, so the form input staffing need ID as hidden if we're using simple form here. So this is the syntax for adding the mapping the attribute for staffing need ID on this object to a hidden field. So now I think if we run this, it's going to pass. No. Oh, actually, it failed with what I was expecting the failure to be last time. So um, we're looking for 0 projects with staffing needs. It was properly marked as done, and now we're looking for 0 projects with staffing needs, and we're getting 1 project with staffing need in the thing. And that is because our view for showing that link and with a count of the staffing needs has no um, has nothing about whether it was done or not. So we're going to go to the schedule view. I'm going to look for the staffing needs. So what this is saying is it's always going to link. We are setting an instance variable staffing needs. Cool. So we don't actually need to make any change here. What we need to do is we need to go to the schedule controller, and where it's doing staffing needs dot all, we want to, I think active will be the opposite of done, or maybe uh, pending. Yeah, pending sounds good. So again, I'm changing the code, and that's going to still fail. And then don't need a controller spec necessarily for this, but then we're going to drop down to the staffing need model. And we've introduced the concept of a pending method. So we'll write a spec for that. It returns the staffing needs that are not done. So we have staffing need. I like to name this staffing need like done. And that one will be done. And then the next one will be staffing need pending. Oh, and then that'll be done false. And then we expect staffing need pending to equal staffing need pending. We don't need to assign done to actually anything for this spec. So undefined method pending for staffing need class. So now we can go over to the staffing need model and implement that scope. Let's see if we can fit it on one line. It didn't at all know the implementation. So I believe that's going to pass now. Cool. So now we've got our pending scope. So now if we run our feature spec, I believe it's going to properly say 0 projects need. Awesome. So nothing here actually visually changed. We still have our 1 project with staffing needs. Here's the staffing need. If we create an assignment for it, choose a person. Actually, let's Catherine. So there should be a hidden field with that staffing need. We click on create assignment. And now we're back on the schedule. Ooh, it still says 1 project with staffing needs. I expected it to say 0. It says it successfully committed. So that's interesting. And we got a successful thing here. We can see that it's on the schedule there. So that's as expected. So let's drill down into this. Let's inspect and see whether that hidden field that we expect to be there is there. Here's the hidden field. It is set to staffing need 1. So now we're going to look at the development log as we go through it. I'm suspecting that there is some thing wrong that the development log is going to show us. There's a lot there. So what I'm looking for is the params, whether the params were properly set. Let's see. Oh, there's a lot here. Okay, here's the post to commitments, and then staffing need is set to the ID. And what we want to see is update staffing. So that is never, the update to the staffing needs was never called, which in theory means that, okay, so here we are calling commitment create. So let's go there. Okay, so what that does is it calls new with the params and then calls save. So that should be fine. Staffing need ID, add our accessor. So what I was suspecting was that staffing need is not present there. So I don't see what is happening there. So what I want to do is I want to try to write a better spec. And what we have is a commitment spec. So here's where we're doing this. It creates where we are setting the staffing need. We never change this doc string. So marks the associated staffing need as done. And let's just run this to make sure that it's passing. Okay. So that's working. As I'm getting a little stuck here in terms of what's happening, it's just a friendly reminder that if you see what's wrong or you have an idea for something for me to take a look at, definitely drop that in the chat. I've got you over here, and I'm keeping an eye out. So thanks for tuning in. Thanks for helping. Okay. So I'm still suspecting that there is, since this spec passes, and I can't see a problem with it, and the controller spec also passed. Actually, let's go to the console and just make extra sure. Okay, so that was not marked as done. It is ID 1. Um, just going to go here. I'm going to delete this. And I'm going to try again. Before I submit, I'm going to make sure that the form is set up properly. Yeah, we have our hidden form field with staffing need ID. It's nested under commitment. It's 1. And what I'm going to do is, so some people would add a debugging statement right now. It just so happens the debugger's not set up properly right now on my app. So I know that I can't do that. So what I'm going to do instead is come here and just add a put statement uh, around staffing need ID. Uh, okay. And then we are still tailing the development log. So now if I need to select a person. And let me just make sure that that is still set. I believe it should be, but I just want to make sure. Yep, it is still set. Okay, so I am searching in the log that is being tailed for inside staffing underscore need, and nothing it didn't print out. Let's just double check over here. Oh, okay, it's over here, not in the log. So inside staffing need 1, inside staffing need 1. Oh, I didn't check to make sure that it had worked. Oh, 0 projects with staffing needs. Okay. So uh, we fixed the problem and things worked as we were expecting this time. Now, I'm not exactly sure what it was that the problem was, but our test was passing and we expected it to work in the browser. So I think something that we probably did um, caused that to happen. So now if we go back to our staffing needs, feature spec, We can change this. We're going to click through to the index. So we can change this to click on. So if it's not there, it will fail. So that's the same as an expectation. And then we expect page not to uh, have content, and it was Rails for project name. So now we're going to click through, and this is actually going to fail because it's going to still be there. Yep, I was right. So if you haven't watched me before, you'll notice I say out loud what I think is going to happen. So this isn't a waste of time. It's guiding me, and that's the point of this. Is it's guiding me, and I think I know what's going to happen. But when what I think is going to happen doesn't happen, I can be like, aha, what I thought happened didn't happen, and so something is wrong, and that helps guide me as well. So that's what's going on there. If you haven't watched me before, and so now if we go to the staffing needs controller, which you can see this is still all, and we want it to be only pending. And that's working now. So taking a look at, well, let's mark this staffing need as not done, so we can see the UI. I think what we're going to do now is so I'm just going to mark them all as not done. So we have the one project with staffing needs. We need to show some more nice information about the need here. That's one thing we need to do. We need to show probably even some more information here. And then we're going to have the ability to comment and subscribe to this need, um, that sort of thing. That's all existing functionality that we can add, we can mix into this model, and we're going to get all of that functionality. So that's another thing we're going to do. There's no ability to edit now, so we're going to need the ability to edit, and we probably want the ability to mark something as done and say it's done. Don't worry about it. Um, and we probably don't want the ability to delete it entirely. We'll just, staffing needs exist and then they're done, whether we staff them or not. And so we'll want to add the ability to edit and delete. Okay, so let's start here. So we have more information about the staffing need. It has not only the skills and the project name, which is being displayed now, but has the concept of for a number of weeks and a date on which it should be starting. That's sort of like a due date. So we want to display that. I think let's take a look at the staffing needs index now. So we have an unordered list of staffing needs. This is an unordered list, and we just have the skill names and the project name. So let's add the due date and the number of weeks that it'll be. So I think for the display here, actually, before I go off and do something, I think we want to change our spec. So we'll go to the feature spec because we're going to be changing the view. We only have one staffing need here. So right now we can write the spec fairly generically. We don't need to. So the staffing need is for 2 weeks. So we should expect the page. We should expect it to have the content 2 weeks. And we should expect the page to have content, and it'll be the starts on of the staffing need. Yeah, and we have a format of short, so we'll give that a try and see how it looks. So now we expect to see that stuff on the page, and we're not gonna see it. Yeah, so expected to find 2 weeks and didn't find it. So now oh, it's not show, it's index. So I'm just checking the syntax of the pluralized. It actually takes the count first and then the singular word. So I've got it mixed up. I had a sense that it was backwards, so that's why I checked. And then we want the due date. So this isn't going to be styled, but let's go over to the view and look at it there. Now I expect the spec to pass now. So let's give it another run and see that it passes. Once it passes, then I'm going to feel free to style things and make it look nice, and know that I'm not going to have broken anything in the process. So I think what I want to have do is I want the uh, amount of time to be underneath it, sort of in a more subtle way, and then the due date off to the side, so that way you can see the list and you're going to be able to see that. I think at that point we have tabular data, so I'm going to change this into a table. And these are going to be TRs. And the due date is going to be in its own table cell. And the link is in its own table cell along with the weeks. So now we have that. This isn't on the right line. And we can add a header. Actually, this should be TH. Someone rang my doorbell. I don't need to go get it. My wife is also working from home today, so she'll be able to go get it. So we have the starting on column. Columns are misaligned. I'm not gonna touch that yet because what I want to do is I want to show you and go over and look for another page that has some similar styles to what we're doing here. So we've got this page, this person, sort of have the 2 weeks. Then we have our table headers formatted very nicely. So that's what I want to steal. So I'm going to go, this is the team. Um, this is the team. So T head. We need to wrap this in a T head to get those styles. See, that did that. And then go back to thing that's, oh, I was looking at the wrong page actually. Team show. There we go. There's the people. Same difference though. T head, TH. And then people, person. So I know we want the first row to be row title. That gives us some mobile style so that on mobile, the title of the row is styled differently. And then I'm just looking, we don't need it. We don't have an image. So we should be good with just the link and then putting the number of weeks in a div. And then, yeah, let's do class font bold and text space as the size. So we are using Tailwind in this app. So some of these things are Tailwind and some of them are classes that we have. So now if we go over to our page, we get that nice big thing. Now let's remove this padding, remove this double border, and get everything nestled right up nice to the top. So we don't need the padding here, and we don't need the border here. So I think that that is nice. It's a little weird not to have a header here. But we have this bigger header here. Let's leave that for now. And let's add another staffing need to see what two look like. We don't have an interface for adding a staffing need yet, so I'll go to the controller. Just looking. Yeah, okay. And we have project ID 3, weeks 4, starts on 3 weeks from now, beginning of week. And so we need to save the need, and then we can add the skills. I'm just grabbing some random skills. I don't know what they are. Looks like, yeah, React and iOS. Okay. So this is what the list looks like. I think we want a border in between each of them. So we'll put a border on the. Notice, I don't know if you can see it on here, but the border on these is much heavier than the other, which is not the case for here. So something's going on. Let's just pop over to that. Oh, it's actually manual. So this is the problem with, you've really got to, when you're using Tailwind, you've really got to take the opportunity to extract certain things. Otherwise, you end up just like copying and pasting over to a new thing. And then, the lack of standardization can hurt you and make it complicated to do. So, and then looks like the last one doesn't have. I don't think that there's going to be anything for that here. I'm just making sure. And then see if there's anything here. There's not. Just looking at whether we want the last one to have the border or not. I would say that we don't, but it's being put there anyway. I know how to do it in CSS. I'm just looking to see whether there's already something existing to use. And if not, then taking care of it that way. I also just want to check to see whether there's extra padding being put here. Let me make this a little. So that extra padding is being put there. It's on the section. So you can see on this one, it's getting set to margin bottom 0. So we're going to do the same thing over here on the section. So now if we go back here, we're not getting that extra spacing. We still have the bottom border, but it is not noticeable because it's light enough and because it's shoved into the bottom. And that's what's happening on this view over here as well. You can sort of see the bottom border. Can't see it in a normal view though. So let's not worry about that for now. We've got a nice looking view overall, much better than it was before. Um, and now if we click into one of these needs, there's still no information about it there. Oh, wait, let's go back to our spec and make sure it's still passing. Make sure that we didn't break anything with the UI changes that we made, and we didn't. So that's great. And now I'm going to commit that. What we did was marking as done and UI improvements. Looks like we had some conflicts here. Um, I think because this is a long running feature branch, our from last week, our schema got messed up. So we want the current change. So we want the breadcrumb. Not sure why these conflicts happen. It's possible that I wasn't paying attention to what I was doing as I was doing it with the current. Weird. I'm not sure what I missed, but we'll get through it. We'll get through it together. Just going back, making sure the latest changes are there. They are, so we're good to go. Let's refresh the page. Yep, see all our recent changes are there, so that's all good. And we push that up to our remote branch. Okay, so now let's think about what we want to be on this page. Most of the information is there on this page. I think what we're mostly going to be doing is adding things. So, but let's start by making sure that the information that we have is when you click through to that page that you see that same information. I think I want this expectation to be first, just because it's the most prominent one. So we want to see that it's Rails for the project. We want to see the duration and we want to see when it should start. Um, if we go over to the schema, you can see project, the number of weeks starts on, and that we are going to add the ability to mark it as done, but we don't have that functionality yet. So, and when we run this spec, we're going to see that it's going to fail because none of that information is there. Actually failed because we got some pending migrations, which is an indicator that we messed up the schema migration, um, but they're pending on tests. So it's not going to be able to run them because they already exist. So um, I'm gonna just drop the. I guess I could have done uh, a different task, but it's okay. That was extreme. Okay, so we expected to find the date and we didn't find the date, but we did find the other things, and that is because it's up in the breadcrumbs here. It says 4 weeks, and then the skills and the project, all the things that are specs we're expecting, which is nice. But I do want to make sure that it's down here. So for right now, I'm just noticing we have a merge conflict uh, in here. Boy, somehow I wasn't paying attention and really uh, messed that up. We're just gonna merge, commit just that. And we have schema changes too. We're just moving things around. So let's add the schema too, and then actually amend the previous fix merge conflict. Okay. So what I'm looking at here is uh, this container here as a quick fix. What it is it is the section for the page that is only going to appear on content areas. We also have section content. So as a quick fix in my feature spec, I could do within. Now, this is the kind of thing where I probably will not let this live forever like this. And I'm really relying on the cycle red green refactor. So I'm trying to make a test, and refactor step includes the specs. But so this is going to, get me continuing to move forward. And as part of developing this feature, I'm eventually going to review things and look for things I don't like or think could be better, and then improve them. And so, just checking for within a class there that is very brittle, I might not want to do that, but I'm going to do it for now so that I can give on before. So expected to find the text Rails for project name in there. Okay, and didn't find anything. Actually, let's just check. Let's change this to section. And the reason why is I have a sense that um, we might want to put the skills and the project name right up top here. Yeah, so expected to find text Rails for project name in staffing need create assignment. So it's not there. So instead of the staffing need header, let's do that. It's staffing need skill names for define method. Oh, I had an S on that one. Okay. As I look at this on the page, I realize each of these things, React is a skill, iOS is a skill, Casino Night is a project. I might want to click through and be able to see more information about each of those projects. And so the way that I've put them here isn't really conducive to a good looking, because it's just going to be a bunch of links all in a line, and they're going to be big and red and underlined. So that's not what I want. I'm going to put this back to just a staffing need header. And I think I'm going to make a more of like a tabular view of things. So we have a similar concept over in uh, where a lot of the staffing needs come from, and that is opportunities, which is a little bit like a CRM. This actually hooks up to our CRM. And you can see that we have this concept of staffing need here, and it's displayed in a table. And it is actually not a table. This is a thing called an info list. It's an info list class, and each one is a div um, with two spans in it. So we'll do that. So that each of these things can be labeled. So we have our info list, and then we have, this would be duration. Starts on duration, and then the skills. And we're missing a class here. Either that or our indentation is messed up. Yeah, our indentation's messed up. Our duration is pluralize week. No, the count goes first. I have a typo here. And then the skills. So I actually, we may have a helper for this. Of course, finding the helper is a whole nother. Well, actually, did the opportunity? Yeah. See how these are each linked, and it's also a sentence. So let's go over to opportunities. Table details is what it's called. The partial. Okay, so it's actually not using a helper. We should probably introduce a helper, but we'll do the minimum thing we can do now to get the specs passing and also make progress. And then we'll introduce that helper a little later. So now if we go back to our staffing needs, you can see we've got this in a tabular format now. We've got these extra padding and an extra border. So let's get rid of those. And then we have extra margin up top. Oops. So now I believe the spec is going to pass. No, it's looking for Rails for project name, and we ended up breaking it down into a table. We also forgot to put the project name. So let's change our spec. So now we expect it to just say Rails, and we expect page to have content. And it's still going to fail, but now we'll be able to go over. Let's add another row here to our info list. It's project. And this is going to be a link to the project. Actually, we want staffing need project name and that should do it. Now I'm expecting that to pass now. Cool. Awesome. So I'm just thinking about what we want to do next. Actually, I think the skills should be up top in the order. Just thinking about the order of information and making it readable. So we have the project and the skills, and then when we want it to start and how long it'll go for. I think that makes sense. Um, okay, let's add the ability to, um, we have being able to create the assignment. Now we want to be able to edit a staffing need. So we can go right to our feature spec. And again, we're sort of building up a feature spec here of the happy path of being able to do everything with staffing needs. And so before we create the assignment from it, that's when I think we want to go and edit it. So we'll click on edit. Now, you could break this up into multiple feature specs. In fact, I probably would, but actually, yeah, let's do that. This spec is getting long, and we also labeled it user schedules a staffing need. So let's just go to and make a new scenario. User edits a staffing need, and that way it's completely separate. We'll copy sort of the setup so we can get the things that we need. We have a department, person, project. Put some skill on the staffing need. And then for this spec, we don't need to click through to it. We can just visit and go right to the so now we expect to have this certain content. We're going to click on edit. And then, yeah, Copilot knows what we're looking to find. This is going to be so we're adding an expectation here because to check the values of the form, because just simply changing it doesn't mean that it was set to the right thing initially. So this makes sense to me to add that. It doesn't have an ends on. It has weeks. I don't think we need the 2S, but we might. Actually, I think we do. Okay, project starts on weeks and then skills. And skills is a multi-select. So actually think the value of that may end up being an array. We only have the one skill there, so that's fine. Cool. So what we're going to do when we come back, we're going to implement this. We're going to take a quick break. We're about halfway through our session for today, so we'll be back in 5 minutes. Thank you so much for watching, and I will be back in just a few minutes. Okay, welcome back. Thanks so much for sticking with me. So we left with a failing spec. I didn't run it right before the break, so let's run it. And unable to find link or button edit. So we have a particular style in this application. See if I can find a example of it. Excuse me. I think maybe let's just add an edit link for now. I just do client. So it's btn edit. So now if we run that, we get an error. We got an error there too. Undefined methods, edit staffing need path. So that guides us to the routes, and we can see that there's not an edit defined. Now the action edit could not be found for staffing needs controller. So this is going to be just assigning that. I should make this a little bit bigger so I don't have to keep on scrolling up. So it's missing a template for the requested format. So we'll touch the template. App view staffing needs edit.html.erb. And now it's going to get to the next step. It's going to say, hey, I wasn't able to find anything on the page, which is what we expect. So let's grab the structure for the page. Oh, I totally grabbed the wrong thing. Staffing need show. So now this is where we're going to have our form. So if you remember, we're using simple form. So we say simple form for, and we give it the object that we want the form for. And that goes into an object. Now the syntax for simple form is similar to the Rails form, but we have a few more options. So we could say form input, and we want project. So actually we have a helper here. I believe it's called project options, and that gives you like all the active projects in the system. And we want, it's just a single. So then we say form input starts on. We need to actually, it might automatically. I think what we want is HTML5 true. And that's going to make a date picker, HTML5 date picker. And weeks input. And we just say submit. So let's take a look at what that looks like in the view. So it's unstyled form, pretty much what we expect. And our button has a unstyle. So let's add some styles. So we're going to style the submit button. Oh, I messed something up. I had an extra comma. Style the submit button. We added some padding. And we want a, on our section header, nice bottom border. And that gives us the date picker. And we have the number of weeks. And we need our skills selector there. That was the thing we were forgetting. So with simple form can handle multi-select to a has many through with no problem. So we just need to tell it, I think it's skill options. We also have a helper for that. And what we want to say is multiple. Actually, we need to say, tell the input that multiple is true. And we actually convert those in the view to a JavaScript autocomplete. But so we can see now we have a nice selector for those. It's interesting though, it's not loading the existing project or the skills. It did load the start date and the number of weeks. So I'm not exactly sure why that is. Let's just run the specs, make sure that it fails in the same way. So it fails. It said, I expected to find the project and it's blank, which is exactly what we're seeing in the view. I'm curious if we change this to project ID, whether it will. It does. So that makes sense, actually. We want this to be skill IDs. So now it's properly filled out. That messed up the label of that one though. And so simple form, we can say label. Not sure why. Oh, yeah, it automatically removes underscore ID, but it doesn't automatically remove underscore IDs. And all of these fields are required. I'm not sure why. Well, let's just go. It should be checking. Oh, um, if we look at the model, yeah, look, we've got no validations for that. So before I change the code, I'm going to go and add some validations. And we want to say it should validate presence of project ID and starts on and weeks. And yeah, sure, let's do it. Should validate that is greater than 0. Looks good to me. We're going to run those specs. They should all fail. They did. So I personally like to have each individual attribute on its own line with its own validations. Um, and that way you can also say for weeks, we want presence and numericality. You can put all the presence validations on one line, but I prefer to do it that way. Cool. So now if we go over to our view, it's going to automatically pick that up and um, and mark them as required. We didn't add that it needs to have skills. And I think we do want to add a validation for skills as well. So I forget off the top of my head when you haven't has many through what you need to validate. I think you want to validate the presence of the skills, and that's going to that it can't be empty. After setting skills to an empty array, the matcher expected it to be invalid, but it was valid. And so now that's passing. Simple form's not going to automatically pick that up because the input there we have is for the skill IDs. So we want to manually we're going to need to manually say required true. That puts that there. Okay. So now if we go back to our spec here, so it found everything on the form. We never wrote the spec to actually make changes to it. So let's do that now. So we're going to change, yeah, sure. Let's change weeks to 3 and click on that. Let's fill in uh it's not project, it's select project from. So we need another project to do. No longer need a department. That was for the scheduler spec. We're going to need another skill. So let's say React. And so we changed the project, and the reason why we only need to choose React here is actually going to check. It's going to, because it's a multi-select. It's going to keep Rails and add React when we select React. I changed the weeks. Okay, so we've changed all those things now, and then we expect the page to have Rails and React. We expect it to have project 2 name. And actually, this is within. And we expect 3 weeks. So let's run that. It's going to fail trying to. Oh, apparently, we were still using department. Actually, we don't need person at all for the spec. And then this is going to be. Okay. Oh, we do need the person for how to have a user. Okay. Unable to find select box project 1. Oh, did I mess up the syntax? Is it? Yeah, I flipped the syntax. Okay, no route matches patch to staffing needs. So that guides us to the routes file. And we have update. Now that we are getting a little longer here, let's change the syntax of this. That should tell us there's no controller action. Yep. And this is going to be a very standard controller, especially right now. So we're going to load the staffing need. Let's see if it can even just do it for us. Load the staffing need, update with the staffing need params. Wonderful. And then so we're going to permit the project ID, starts on, weeks on, and the skill ID is perfect. Awesome. So that was able to successfully save and then go back to the show and show that it has been successfully saved. So let's just cool. And I'm noticing that when I edited this, it changed the order and this got sorted to the bottom. And that reminds me that we want to sort these by starting on. We don't have a spec for that. So let's add that spec. This one we can add just a new scenario. User sees staffing needs sorted by start date. And the way that we're going to write this, I don't think Copilot's going to be able to do it. Yeah, uh, the way that I would write it, but let's check. Yeah, see, so Copilot, if you see, Copilot just checks have content for the first one and the second one. There's not any actual order tested here. So we can take the setup. That's all the setup is fine here. Person with position, creating a project, creating two staffing needs, one that starts 1 week from now, 2 weeks from now. It even puts the one that should be first created second, so that we're checking that creation order doesn't matter. So the way that we need to check this is we say staffing needs, and then we say find all. And we don't need to do a staffing need class. Uh, we have uh, we want the due date, the start date to be the last table cell, so we can just do that. And we're going to get the text from each of those. So now we say we expect and this is where we say staffing need. So we expect staffing need 2 to be before staffing need 1. So we expect those to be in that order. We got the text on the page. So I expect this to fail because we haven't actually implemented the sorting yet. So we expected, oh, did I say name? So that's, we need to format the date. So we expect the dates to be in that order, and they're reversed now. So now we can go to the staffing needs controller. And for the index, we can say order. And run that spec again, and now it should pass. Cool. Now go back over here, and now they're in the right order. Wonderful. So while we're here, and we're dealing with dates, let's highlight one when it's past due. So I think we can do this right in the spec, and user schedules a staffing need. Let's just make this staffing need 1 week ago, the beginning of the week. And then when we're on the index, we should see that it's overdue. How do we want to? I actually think so. We have tickets in this application, and I think that there might be an overdue class. And what it does is it makes flags it as red. So let's just again, there's only one staffing need on this page, so I feel comfortable not being super like finding the right thing. Um, is actually going to fail because there's not something with the overdue class on it. Unable to find CSS overdue. So now I think we want to put this in a span and we want to say class. Is there a past method on dates? Let's assume that there is. So if the starts on is past, then we're going to add the overdue class to that. Let's just see. Past, it's on time, date time. So it might not be on date, but let's see. Okay, it is. So perfect. So we have the highlighted red if it is in the past. So now the spec should pass. Oh, we had a spec. I think we can say so we're just making that to be more generic since we changed the date. I think that's going to do it. So we expected November 19th and we got the 12th. Let's just look at a calendar. November 19th is a Sunday and we got the 12th, which is the previous Sunday. I think this is just a matter of how we originally sorry. This should be 1 week now. So we want to add a week and then it'll be the end of the week, which will be 2 weeks of calendar time. That's what we want. Cool. And we've got our spec for editing and it being sorted properly. The show is being updated after editing. And we could, for example, change this now. Oh, that's still in the past. Time flies. Uh, change this to next week. So now it's no longer overdue. Just thinking about what we want to do next. So I think what we want to do next is add the ability to comment on these staffing needs and have a conversation about how we're going to staff it. This is pretty straightforward in terms of um, the feature itself because we have a whole bunch of commenting functionality and it's pretty straightforward to add it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over to another thing that has commenting functionality. Just going to copy that feature spec and use that as the basis for writing the spec. It's dependent on JavaScript, or at least it's not entirely dependent on JavaScript, but we want to, the most rich interface for commenting is, excuse me. And so we want a staffing need. And the mailer, staffing need path. We're going to fill in the rich text area with the comment body and click on comment. And then we should see that the comment body has been added to the page. And also that the person who commented has now been subscribed to the page. This is going to fail completely since we haven't added any of this functionality, but I want to see that things are generally copied and pasted correctly. So we're getting an accessibility failure here. Heading level should only increase by 1. That's an interesting violation, and the reason why is it's going from there's a H3 with a staffing need, but there's no H2, and that's sort of funny. Uh, I don't even know that the styles will work. It's probably okay. Let's see. It doesn't even change. So let's change it on the show page too. So you may have, I didn't call it out, but we have a gem that when the capybara specs run with the Chrome, with the headless web browser, it's actually checking for accessibility things as well, which is pretty nice. So we can see that the specs have run and unable to find the rich text area comment body. There's nothing because we haven't added the comments functionality yet. So now we can go over and we can just grab the markup for adding commenting. Just making sure I have the right thing. Okay. So this is going to be another section inside the page block. So the page block. Oh, here we have a content block. So I think we want to put it inside the content block as well. So we have section, it's 2 levels in. Section is 2 levels in. I think I just grabbed a incorrect. Yeah, I grabbed one extra div, I think. Yep, cool. So on that other page, it was a little bit different because there was a timeline. So here we could just change it to comments. So there's a few things about this page that are a little bit different for the tickets view than so I think that that changes all the markup there. If we go over here, we're gonna get that it doesn't have the subscribing and commenting functionality, which is what we expect. Let's run the specs and make sure that we get the same error. Yeah, so undefined method active subscribers. So if we go over to that ticket class, which is where we were pulling uh, we can see that it should have many comments, subscriptions, and subscribers. Oh, staffing needs spec. So this is a functionality that we want: comments, subscriptions, and subscribers. So that's not going to pass. And then we have a mix-in that adds all that functionality. We have include subscribable. And then you just need to do it has many comments as commentable. So so now let's run that spec again. Oh, last week we had temporarily skipped a spec because we didn't know whether we wanted that functionality combined with not having it written. But so that's what that is. But the specs that we just wrote relative to the relationships are there now. So let's run the feature spec and see what else, if anything, we're missing. So we get some accessibility errors. We're going to need to fix those. But there's another error here too. Undefined method 2-time for no class. And it is I guess the created at is nil. It's not quite the failure that I was expecting. So That's interesting. Let's go over to the view and see if we, yeah. So I'm just going to another thing and looking for the comments. So this one is a little bit different. So we have the comments, then a build, and then over here we have the comments and a build with. So I don't see anything setting the. Okay. So what we're going to do is just replace that. And here, this actually matches a little bit better because we want the form to be on the bottom and we want comments to go down on this one. We might still get this error. Nope. Okay. So we need to fix the spacing on this, but now you can see we have a bunch of, and we need to fix this white background is all sorts of messed up. So that's fine. At least we're rendering now. I think part of the issue is we have this content block. And so I think what we actually want is that content block to end and a new one to start. Just make sure. Yeah. So now we have the two blocks. The second block is all the commenting functionality. We can see we got the subscribers, the ability to subscribe, and the ability to comment. So we got all that with just adding, about 5 lines to the model. We added the specs already. So that's great. And let's run the feature spec. So Dimitri, thank you for the question, asks, why did we decide on a full stack instead of a REST API? And the answer is that would be the Rails default way of doing things, and that is to build a normal, relatively normal HTML application, and then all the forms and everything are fast and responsive because they're doing remote submission and rendering HTML on the server side. And we're not doing full page reloads because we're using Turbo to do the navigation between the pages, and so it's only taking the contents of the pages that change. That's the normal Rails way of doing things. If you are building a React app on top of a REST API, you're essentially creating more work as you build out the whole UI in React on top of the REST API. You can totally do that, and for some applications that it makes sense. But for this relatively straightforward CRUD-based application, we save a lot of time by doing um, the Rails way of doing things, and it's still fast and responsive. Hope that answers your question, Dimitri. Thank you very much. Um, so, okay, Dimitri clarifies the question. Thanks, Dimitri. How do you handle the URL change when updating HTML with Turbo? I mean, Turbo handles that by default if I get your question right. So you can see the URL. If I'm going through here, I'm navigating with Turbo through all these. The URL is changing. Um, oh, I've accidentally left 2 comments. Um, I need to look at that. Um, but when we leave a comment, the URL doesn't change. Um, so that's fine. If I didn't understand your question, feel free to uh, to clarify. So that left just one comment. That's interesting. Let me just try something again. Okay, so I didn't say this at the time, but what I was doing was I was hitting Command Return to submit the form, and it's looking to me like when I hit Command Return to submit the form, it's doing it twice, and when I just click on the button, it's only doing it once. That is really interesting to me, and I wasn't don't think that's a widespread defect in the app. So just gonna take a quick look why that might be. I don't see a reason why that is. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna just make a note for myself about that bug. I don't want it to completely sidetrack me right now and come back to it later for further investigation and fixing. Cool. So we have this, and we have the commenting functionality. We have editing, and we have the ability to go ahead and schedule off of that staffing need. So I think now we want the ability to manually mark it as done. I'm just pausing because I'm thinking, okay, where should that live in the UI? How common of an action is that, and where do we want it to live? I'm thinking it's not very common. Most of the time, you're going to create an assignment from something and you want it marked as done then. And so I sort of want to include it under a menu and move edit underneath that menu as well. So I'm going to make a new spec about manually marking something as done. Uh, we'll start with the editing spec because I think that makes sense. And we'll just copy that for the setup and modify it. User manually marks a staffing need as done. We need a person, we need a project. We don't need another project. We don't need other skills. In fact, we can just let the skills don't matter. So we can let the factory make the skills. And in fact, project doesn't matter for this. So we can let the project start date doesn't matter. Weeks don't matter. So we can let the factory fill in all that information. Then we're going to visit the staffing need page. This stuff doesn't matter. So we are going to click on mark as done. And what happens when we manually mark things as done? So, Dimitri, no problem. I really appreciate the questions. Dimitri's asking, is the sidebar static? And it's a partial, and is it re-rendered for each request, or is it static? So, in this particular application, what's happening is it is Turbo browses to the next page, fetches the next page using JavaScript, uh, essentially looks at what has changed on the page or which areas we've defined as static, and only replaces the other parts of the parts of the page that should be replaced. In this particular application, we have actually not defined the sidebar as static. So it's replacing the whole contents of the page without doing a full page refresh. But we totally could say this part of the page is static. And so leave that page. In fact, let me go to, we have a, if we go to the clients view. Yeah. So clients view has a static search bar over here. Let me collapse this. So clients view has a static search bar that has been declared as static. So now I can type here and just hit enter, and it's just refreshing the box on the left. The right side is not doing it. It is just sending back using uh, um, Hotwire just the portion of the page that changed. And we can say, account manager, person 5. This is just test data, and you can see it's not changing this page. In fact, it doesn't even collapse the search over here. It's dynamically refreshing every time the form changes. It's reloading that portion of the page. So you can see it's fast and responsive. Well, that didn't actually change. It's fast and responsive without, uh, but it's all doing HTML rendering and JavaScript using Turbo and Hotwire. So thank you for your questions, Dimitri. I really appreciate it. And hopefully that answers them. Oh, you're asking, Dimitri asks, what is the code for persisting the filter panel? There are a couple of different ways of doing this. The way that you can do it is you can declaratively render into portions of the page, and you can also say that a portion of the page is static. Let's look at which one we're doing here. The right solution depends on how you doing it and what exactly the page is doing. So if we go to the opportunity index and we go to the filters block, here's the form. So yeah, so here on this, we are just saying data, we're setting a data attribute turbo permanent on this div. And so now Turbo knows when the page is refreshed, keep that part of the page permanent. Don't replace that part of the page. You need an ID on the element. So what it does is it saves the um, block with the same ID and doesn't replace it. So that's happening. You can also render into using Hotwire, and you can render into a particular portion of the page, but that's not what we're doing here. We're setting a portion as permanent. Awesome. Thank you so much for the question. I appreciate it. So undefined method person for staffing need is happening here. It's a weird. Oh, our I wasn't doing the right spec here. usually marks. Okay. So what we were looking at was where is we're going to have a click on mark as done, and then we need some indicator that it's done. Actually, I think the indicator is that once a staffing need is filled, there won't be a button to create an assignment for it anymore. So expect the page, and button. Oh, it's a link, so it's fine. Not to have content. Actually, we don't want it to have the content mark as done, and we don't want it to have. We don't want it to have the content. What was it? It was create assignment. A little bit of a typo here. So we expect it to not have. So what we're getting is unable to find the link or button mark is done. It's failing right here. That's perfect because we haven't added that yet. So I'm going to. So we're going to we're going to introduce a menu here. And the markup for that is a little bit. Uh, so we want to create a div at the top of the page. It's going to be hidden, and it has the class dropdown, and that's where we put all of our dropdown stuff. And then we're going to add a link. Let's clean up our views here. Oh, I'm just realizing as I do this that another way we could do it is to mark something as done. You could click on edit, and then there could be a mark as done here. Hmm. I think that the most likely flow here is from the list. You're looking at it and you're saying, okay, that is done. I don't need to do anything more for that. So clicking in, having to click in again, and then mark is done is a little bit. So let's keep on the track that we were on. So we have our drop down. So unless staffing need is done, we are going to have a button. And this is going to be And then that button is going to um, submit with params, and it's going to be automatically a um, a post because it's button 2. So the params we want would be staffing need and then done. True. So that's going to add that, and then we need to go over and get the rest of the drop down markup. So it's behind a more link. And we have a staffing need instead of a ticket. Okay, let's see how this looks. Looks like an error. I probably have a typo. Yep. Here, I'm missing that. Edit uninitialized constant staffing need. Oh, I accidentally capitalized. So there's our edit drop down. That's a little awkward, huh? Having that submit button, that big green button next to the more link. I'm thinking how we want this to look. We can move that button down and put it down at the bottom here where we could flip them. Let's see how that looks. That is also not great. Okay, I think I answered my question. Let's move the mark is done to the edit page. That's going to be, I think, just as intuitive. It is just as many clicks, and I think that's fine. It gets us to move forward without worrying too much about the perfect experience here. So I'm just removing everything I just did. That we can just delete. Okay, we're back to there. And now let's change the spec. This time we're going to click on edit, then click on mark as done. And then we should end up back on the staffing need page, and we should not see that, and we should not see that. And then if we click on edit again, now we'll say click on mark as not done. And then it should have the content there. Cool. So that's now we're going to the edit page to mark it as done. And we're going back and actually we should also check to make sure that it no longer appears on the index. So page not to have content, and it's going to be staffing need dot project dot name, so that that project name should not appear anywhere on the list of staffing needs. Dimitri, this is not open source. This is an application that we use internally for all of our scheduling, um, staffing projects. It hooks into a bunch of different systems. We call it Hub, and it hooks into a bunch of different systems that we use. It's a big Rails monolith for running thoughtbot, and so it is not open source. Um, so sorry. Okay, unable to find the link or button mark is done. Perfect. And so now we go to staffing need edit, and we're going to put it right in the header. What we want is a button to mark as done. And it's a staffing need path. Staffing need params. Okay, let's run the spec again. So we now added the button. It's going to try to post to staffing needs 44 to do that. Oh, that's interesting. It's posting. We want to change that to a patch. That should be a patch. Let me just refresh my memory button to. Okay, so it's just method patch. I thought that it would pick that up automatically because it already is persisted, but cool. So it's automatic. It's successfully submitting it, but that is an unpermitted parameter. So we need to permit it. And okay, so what's happening now is it has submitted and it's come back and it's unable to find the link or button edit. And the reason why is because um, the staffing needs controller, after successfully saving, redirects to the index. So that edit button is not going to be there. Redirecting to the index actually makes sense in this case. So let's change our spec. So you're not going to immediately be able to click on button, and that project, the staffing need is no longer listed there. So we're going to need to manually go to staffing need path for the staffing need, and it'll still exist. And then click on and so there we go. Unable to find link or button, mark as not done. So now we go back to our edit page, and if staffing need done, we're going to have a mark as not done with done false. And then what we had there before becomes the else. So now if we run this, I believe it's going to pass. I believe. Nope, I was wrong. Unexpected to find text create assignment. I think this is the same problem. Yeah, it's no longer going back to the index, the show page. It's going back to the index. So I think we want to change this, and this is a good instigator for doing it. So that's passing now. But see how we're manually browsing back? I do think we want some way to. Oh, we need to mark as done is unstyled. So let's style that. I think it's going to be class btn, and I think for mark is not done, we want new, and for mark is done, we want btn. I think it's delete. Nope. Is it destroy? Yes. Okay, cool. So now if we mark that as done, we go back there, it's no longer listed. So now I think we need some way to view the previous done items so that we can actually get back to them if we need to. And since our spec is more complicated without it because we're manually browsing to the individual pages that we had, let's do that now. Actually, before I do that, all our specs are passing. So, and we've finished that main feature we were working on. So let's commit. Cool. So I think here we don't have a lot of complex stuff going on, and this ultimately is usually a list of 5 to 10 things. So we don't need a lot of complex filtering and sorting here. So I think what I'm going to do is just have a button up here that you'll be able to click to be able to see uh, the done items. That's going to be tricky because once you expose the done items, there's going to be a lot of done items because they never go away. Like there'll be all of the staffing that we've ever done will be on the done page. So then you will need filtering and sorting there. So that's interesting. as I realize that, I'm wondering whether then we just want filtering and sorting just to have it so then we can find it on the done page. And I think, for MVP for the first version of this, I wouldn't necessarily want that. But what I am finding throughout this application is we eventually do want filtering and sorting pretty much everywhere. And so even though it's more work, I would be inclined to do that. The thing is we don't need that for right now because um, we don't have a lot of items now. So on first pass, I'm going to do that. I'm going to, so we expect it to not have the project there. Then when we click on view all, then we can click on the project name. So see, that'll be there now. And then when we mark as not done, we end up back on the index, and we should be able to click on it again, and then it won't have. So that's how I have adjusted the specs. Now I'm going to run them. They're going to fail. Yeah, no link, view all. So let's go over to the needs index and add a link to view all. I think what we want is staffing needs path all is true. So the reason why, so I would normally not just pass in a parameter necessarily to view all, but I'm going to do this way because I'm eventually anticipating adding more complex filtering and those kinds of things. So I'm not going to be perfect about how I add this because I know that it's going to change pretty soon. So I'm just doing the minimum functionality in the specs, getting the specs to pass, and then we'll eventually add full filtering and searching here. So you need to style the button. I think. Okay. Yeah, I don't like the red. I noticed we had a alt. What is an alt? Yeah, that's better. Okay. And so now we've already got feature specs. So we can go to the staffing needs controller and on the index, I'm going to rewrite this to scoped staffing needs. And then I'm going to define that. And if params all is, it's going to come through as a string. So we can't do that. We got to do this. Then we do staffing need all, else we do staffing need pending. We're always going to apply the order. And so I think that's going to do it. Let's run the spec. Yeah, that passed. So now you can see we have the view all button and it works. It doesn't toggle. So let's make it toggle. We always want to add a spec first. So view all. Now view all. Yeah, it's there. We can do click on view pending. So now if we click on view pending, we expect the page not to have the project name, and then we'll click back on view all. I'm just going to add some spacing here to separate the action and the expectation that we're expecting to go along with that action. So now I'm toggling back and forth, expecting and not expecting to see the different functionality. This is going to fail because we haven't done that yet. And so now I can say, if it's true, then we want to view pending. And do all false. Else. Oops. And so let's see if the specs pass. And we're just about wrapping up for the day here. So I am getting to a point now. See, view pending, view all, pending, view all. And Dimitri, you can see the URL is changing, even though it's not doing a full page reload. We get all that functionality, quote unquote, for free. And it's nice and fast and responsive. So cool. Well, we got that going. Spec is passing. All our specs are passing. Let's commit and wrap up for the day. I just want to, as usual, look at the diff. We're going to eventually add filtering to this, more complex filtering, but now we've just toggled the view all. We could go live with that and it would be fine. We're only going to have, a certain number of staffing needs for 30 days, 60 days until we actually need filtering. So that's one way of bringing functionality live as quickly as possible and then expanding on it. I'll often do that when I want to get something live that I've been working on, particularly in a fast running feature branch. So that we added the ability to view the done staffing needs. We'll push that up. We've got a draft PR open where we've been working on this. I think we're very close to being able to actually launch this to production. The thing is, there's no ability to create staffing needs now. And the way that we're going to create staffing needs in this first version is when we close something in our CRM and we say, okay, this is a project that's happening. Our CRM knows the kind of project it is and what skills and duration and everything that it should be. Those are tracked in estimates. So when it gets closed and becomes an actual project, a background job gets created to create the project and create the client if it needs to be created. And that's where we're going to then create a bunch of staffing needs based on what that project is expected to look like. And so, again, I'm off tomorrow for the Veterans Day holiday in the US, but my colleagues in Europe are going to pick it back up. They're not going to work on this. They're going to be working on um, a Ruby gem, a gem that we make called Suspenders. It's a Rails generator that generates applications with our defaults. We're in the process of updating that not only to the latest version of Rails, but to our latest practices. We've got a lot of different things that are baked in, and the new strategies, because it's built on uh, it's doing a lot of stuff manually, but now Rails has the concept of templates built in. And so we'll be able to build it on top of Rails templates. So we've been working on that. There's a variety of people across thoughtbot. They're going to be in Europe time zones. So I believe they get started at 9:30 a.m. UTC tomorrow, which is 4:30 a.m. US Eastern time. So if you're in a time zone that works, I hope you'll tune in to watch them both on YouTube and on Twitch. Again, as always, thoughtbot is available to help you with your own Rails application, either to make a new app, maintain or improve an existing app. We also do lots of mobile development with both native first-party frameworks and React Native. And we do great product design as well. And so we help people go from concept to launch of a new idea, or to improve and scale their existing application, both web and mobile. If any of that sounds like something that you need, please go to thoughtbot.com/hire us. Really appreciate everyone tuning in, everyone for the help and the questions. I'll be back next week, and I believe next week we'll be able to wrap up the initial version of this functionality and actually launch it to production so that people across thoughtbot can start to use it. And I'm looking forward to that. Thank you very much, and talk to you later. Bye. Thanks so much for watching. Thanks, Dimitri, for all the questions. Thanks, everybody, for watching. I really appreciate it, and I'll see you later.